Originally, Yunwu entered the cavern by accident and then jumped into that pit because she had no other choice. She truly didn't want anything from that phoenix. But now, out of curiosity, she decided to go in there and find out what this legendary creature, which had drawn so many people here, looked like. Ignoring that spotted snake, Yunwu tapped on the floating rock with the tip of her foot and swiftly leaped onto another rock. In this way, she headed for the depths of the cavern. What did people call phoenixes, birds bathing with fire? When Yunwu landed on a floating rock and saw that fiery red phoenix soaking in magma with flames all over its body, she couldn't help feeling somewhat excited. It was so dignified, so beautiful. Yes, it was majestic and beautiful. That majesty was in its blood, and that beauty was beyond words. Suddenly, the whole cavern started quaking. Roar, as if from outside the cavern, a dragon roar came. The whole cavern was quaking, along with the magma in the pool. Yunwu was still in amazement, but because of the quaking of the cavern, she was losing her footing. Almost out of instincts, Yunwu immediately clenched her teeth, enveloped herself with space element, and disappeared out of thin air. Right at this moment, the phoenix in magma raised its head and squeaked out a shrill cry, magma splashing around. Finally, a fiery red egg was laid. Phoenix, how dare you gave birth to its child? At this moment, a gruff, loud voice full of anger abruptly came from the entrance of the cavern. It took almost merely an instant for it to travel such a long distance. In the blink of an eye, a giant black dragon stormed over with furiously widened eyes. Black dragon, don't go too far. You've been pursuing me since I was in the dragon phoenix realm. Now I'm in the mortal realm. What else do you want? The female voice said with suppressed anger. You know exactly what I want. Hand over that bastard child to me. No way. Well then, you leave me no choice. Roar. With a roar, potent chi instantly pervaded the cavern, and with that the black dragon rapidly hurtled towards the phoenix in magma. The flames on the phoenix instantly flared up. It raised its head, let out a squeak, and stormed towards the black dragon head-on. The dragon was mighty and aggressive, while the phoenix, however, had an air of majesty about it, like that of a goddess. However, bang bang, boom, boom. Two potent powers clashed together, quaking the whole cavern. Tightly clenching her teeth, Yunwu struggled to shield herself with space element. If she showed herself, there was no doubt she would become a hapless victim of that power the moment she did it. But all of a sudden, Yunwu felt the rock beneath her feet start quivering. She lowered her head, flicked a look at it, and was somewhat terrified. The floating rock broke apart, magma splashing around. Her whole body, no, all the magma and floating rocks in the pool instantly started churning. And the cause of this was the phoenix and the dragon. Yunwu's face went ghastly pale. Heedless of other concerns, she immediately gave up the space element shelter, enwrapped herself with wind element, and leaped upwards. Unlike that occasion when she was in the forbidden area, if she got entangled in this magma, she probably would be melted completely without a single piece of her body left. A human? How dare this human intrude in this place? You're courting death. The moment the black dragon finished the last word, it hurled a bolt of fierce chi at Yunwu. Damn it! Yunwu cursed in a low voice and dodged aside in a flustered manner. Fortunately, the black dragon's target seemed to be that egg the phoenix had just laid, and it had nothing but scorn for Yunwu, who was merely a human. Roar, taking advantage of the moment when the phoenix was distracted, the dragon created a tornado of energy and swirled the magma upwards. Realizing what the dragon was trying to do, the phoenix squeaked furiously and erupted lances of flame towards the enemy. No human could survive the power undulation generated by a fight between two divine beasts. Given her over-fatigued body, Yunwu certainly didn't stand a chance. Under the power, she felt as if somebody was dismembering her with a saber and a saw. The pain was so unbearable that she nearly spat blood. This was an opportunity for her, so she immediately swished towards the entrance of the cavern. However, a red sphere suddenly flew over to her. As if out of instincts, she stretched out her hand and caught it. When Yunwu saw what that thing in her hand really was, she was somewhat stunned. An egg? That was an egg about the size of a football, but it was giving off a mysterious, black chi. It felt both a little hot and a little cold, which was very weird. What was going on? Wasn't this the egg that the phoenix had just laid? Why did it suddenly fly to her? Did this egg by any chance have consciousness? Did it take to her at first sight and decide to follow her? But clearly, she thought too much. When Yunwu saw that a whirl of magma driven by the tornado was coming squarely at her with a wave of scorching heat, her face suddenly turned colorless. Fuck. She nearly blurted out a four-letter word. Instinctively hugging that egg tight, she swished towards the outside of the pit as fast as she could. My baby. The thundering bellow of rage rippled through the cavern like furious tides, everything in the cavern shaking violently. The moment Yunwu flashed out of the pit, she abruptly gasped in horror at the sight in front of her, eyes wide open. Those black, wriggling creatures almost occupied the whole entrance of the cavern. Some of those people who were fighting outside the cavern intruded inside and accidentally touched those black creatures crawling all over the wall and the ground. Rustle. With a rustle, before they could scream, those creatures devoured them, not leaving a single bit. The whole entrance of the cavern was blocked by those black creatures. She could distinctly feel that the scorching heat was getting closer and closer from the depths of the cavern, indicating that the energy undulation generated by the fight between the phoenix and the dragon was spreading outwards. If she stayed here, she would surely be dead in a short while. God damn it. You got me into serious trouble. There was no time for her to do more thinking. Yunwu hurriedly exerted her spiritual power on the 1/3 of the primal fire that she had withdrawn, guided it through her arm, and with that a flame popped out of her right palm. With facilitation of fire elemental power, the primal fire flared up, and with that Yunwu hurled it towards the ground. Rustle. On contact with the fire, those black creatures instantaneously ignited. Feeling that she was depleting her spiritual power, Yunwu gathered all her strength, enveloped herself in fire element, and flashed along the path of fire out of the cavern. On getting out of it, she focused her attention on the primal fire burning among those black creatures and withdrew it. Taking advantage of the chaotic fight, she quickly fled in a direction where nobody was ahead. She felt that she was about to collapse. After she arrived in this exotic world, this was the first time that she had exhausted both strength and spiritual power. There was sharp pain all over her, but she mustn't stop. She just kept rushing forward, as if with her formidable willpower. Sounds of the fight between those people and between the dragon and the phoenix, as well as the roars of rage let out by the two mythological creatures, could still be heard. Clearly, this was not going to be a peaceful night in this forest. How long have I been running? Yunwu had no idea. She just knew that when walking in a wood, she suddenly missed her footing and started falling down. What is this place? Yunwu also didn't know, because there was no light at all. It was pitch dark around and she couldn't see anything, but she knew she was still falling. She could feel it. It felt as though she was falling in a bottomless pit. Currently, Yunwu didn't even have enough strength to move her fingers. Due to overconsumption of strength and lack of beast blood supplement, waves of tearing pain were rushing through her every nerve. She was exhausted, and all she wanted to do was close her eyes and have a sleep. And she did that. Or, because of that egg in her arms, the state of which had been alternating between hot and cold, her body inexplicably descended into intense sleepiness. After a short while, Yunwu flaked out. The moment she fell asleep, that red egg in her arms suddenly started shining at regular intervals as its temperature alternated between high and low. Right at this moment, some green strips like willow twigs stretched out of Yunwu's abdomen, looking very weird. And then, with a swish, those strips shot towards the wall and adhered to it. Yunwu's body instantly stopped falling, hanging in midair in this pitch-dark pit, her abdomen facing upwards. Just like this, the red egg in her arms quietly waited to hatch, absorbing the residual primal fire in her right arm bit by bit. Yunwu stayed in deep sleep one day after another. Soon, a month passed by and she still didn't wake up. Because of her missing, some secret organization threw the Luo city into chaos. For the same reason, magic beasts launched an unprecedented mass attack on the border. However, this girl sleeping in this dark pit was totally unaware of any of this. Everything stayed the same around her. An extra half a month passed. The pitch-dark pit was suddenly lit by a red light accompanied by scorching heat. Surprisingly, those willow twigs adhering to the walls had grown a lot bigger, looking exuberant and vigorous. Yunwu was no longer hanging but lying on those willow twigs. Crack, crack, crack. The sounds of something cracking were heard. Yunwu, who had been asleep all along, was waken up by those cracks coming from beside her ears. It's so hot. Yunwu knitted her eyebrows together the moment she woke up, feeling miserably hot, as if she was in an oven. Crack, crack. She abruptly opened her eyes, and a purple light flashed across her purple pupils. Yunwu was unaware of this. She hadn't moved for so long that she felt stiff all over, and her joints clicked as she sat up. She looked downwards and then upwards, but all she saw was darkness. When she realized the situation she was in, she was stunned. What the hell is this place? Suddenly, what had happened before she fell down flashed across her mind. Was this pit that she had fallen into literally bottomless? Just as its name implied, a bottomless pit had no bottom, and anyone fell into it would keep falling downwards forever. Didn't the god of hard luck favor her too much? Crack, crack. While Yunwu was speechless with resignation, the sounds of eggshell cracking were heard again. Yunwu instantly lowered her eyes onto the red egg in her arms. On the sight of it, Yunwu was taken aback. The egg, which was originally about the size of a football, had grown to over twice its original size. It was shining intermittently, the color of the light alternating between red and black, which imparted a thick air of mystery to it. She merely had a sleep, yet it grew so much bigger. Crack, crack. For some inexplicable reason, sounds of eggshell cracking became more frequent, as if the little creature inside the egg was about to hatch out. It was said that it took a hen 21 days to hatch her eggs, but this phoenix egg hatched after merely a sleep of hers? Wasn't it too easy to hatch a divine beast's egg? However, what Yunwu didn't know was that her sleep lasted a month and a half. The world outside had descended into chaos long ago. Crack! All of a sudden, with a crisp sound, a crack appeared in the eggshell and soon stretched and branched. Yunwu couldn't help staring squarely at it out of curiosity. Since it was a phoenix egg, the creature coming out of it would naturally be a phoenix. Its mother was very mighty and beautiful, so this little thing must also be gorgeous. However, sneeze. A dazzling red light abruptly burst through the eggshell, and with that fiery red flames instantly pervaded the pit. The fire was fierce with awe-inspiring momentum. Everything happened so fast. When the flames died down, everything around her was badly burnt and blackened. Yunwu, who was still in amazement, was the most intrusive being in this scene. She was pitch black from head to toe, her burnt hair smoking, as if she had just crawled out of a dirty stove. At this moment, a chubby little head slowly craned out of the eggshell which had only its lower half left. What was that? After a moment's perplexity, Yunwu collected herself, but before she could get angry, the creature inside the eggshell stunned her again. Like human, it had 2 hands, 2 feet, a pair of eyes, a pair of ears and a nose, but it was different from human. Its little head was bald, and it had red, soft feathers on its plump body. Its eyes were big and round, very cute, but it had 2 little fangs revealed outside its small, red mouth, which made it look like a small zombie. It appeared somewhat ferocious, but also very adorable. However, this wasn't exactly what a phoenix was supposed to look like, was it? After craning out of the eggshell, the little thing curiously swept its large, cut eyes around in a cute manner. It seemed to be watching something, but it also seemed to be looking for something. When it raised its head and saw the pitch-black Yunwu in front of it, it tilted its little head aside, as if thinking about something. But soon, it furrowed its brow, a seemingly disgusted look glinting in its eyes. Ugly. It uttered an indistinct word in a babyish voice. Yunwoo had never expected that a half-human little freak would be disgusted by her someday. She was a little annoyed. This little thing nearly roasted her when it was still in the egg, and the first thing it told her after it hatched out was that she was ugly. She stretched out her hand, grabbed its chubby little leg in the eggshell, and lifted it up. "You little fatty. You are the ugly one. Ugly, ugly." It waved its claws and grimaced at her, revealing 2 fangs. Yunwoo goggled at the little fatty about the size of a puppy, saying angrily, "You are ugly. You whole family are ugly guys. Damn little fatty. I'll beat you." It kept swinging its little hands, but was unable to reach Yunwoo. Its large round eyes filled with tears. "Ugly? You still won't stop?" Yunwoo glared at it. What she was unaware of was that her face was as black as the back of a wok, so it was very natural that this little thing felt she was ugly. "Ugly, ugly." Yunwoo fixed the little thing in her hand with a stare, feeling extremely depressed. Eventually, she realized that she was kind of being too childish. Why am I taking this little thing's words so seriously? She loosened its grip and dropped it into the lower half of the eggshell. "Stupid little fatty. I'm too busy to argue with you," she murmured. Yunwoo moved the eggshell aside, stood up and stretched out a little, finding that both her strength and spiritual power had been fully restored. So she decided to figure out a way to get out of this place. However, it was at this moment that she discovered that those willow twigs were rooted in her waist. After scanning her body with spiritual power, she gasped in amazement. It turned out that it was the branch in her abdomen from which those twigs sprouted. That branch rooted in her flesh had turned into a seed sprouting a lot of green shoots, which took root near her dantian and was growing as the golden red pearl spun. What was that exactly? These twigs had sprouted from her flesh. Would she be occupied by it and become a tree someday? The more she thought about it, the more afraid she felt. She couldn't help wondering whether there was a way to extract that weird branch out of her. If she were still in her last incarnation, maybe she could extract it with a surgical operation. But in this exotic world, who else could perform a surgical operation like that apart from herself? However, before that, she believed she had better figure out a way to get out of here first. While Yun was contemplating with a frown on her face, that chubby little thing in the eggshell behind her took a few sniffs around, tilted its head and looked up at her, as if contemplating as well. It knitted its little eyebrows and then released them. After quite a while, it crawled out of the eggshell clumsily, toddled on its little plump legs to Yunwoo's feet, stretched out its claws and pulled her pant leg. Yunwoo lowered her head. When she saw that little creature who had just told her she was ugly, she knitted her willow leaf-shaped eyebrows and gave it a gentle kick, as if she disliked it. "Go play. Leave me alone." That chubby little thing lost its footing due to that gentle kick and rolled away. It almost fell off the willow twigs. Yunwoo flicked a glimpse at it. Seeing that it was okay, she ignored it. Racking her brains, she wondered how she could get out of this pit. She remembered that she had been falling for a very long time after she fell into this bottomless pit, which meant that this place was probably very deep underground. How long would it take her to climb out of this pit? Would she make it? However, at this moment, she felt that something was pulling her pant leg again. Lowering her head, she saw the little creature looking up at her with big, liquid eyes. The expression on its face was different from the previous disgusted one. This time, it stared at her piteously. "Mom!" Yunwoo nearly threw up on hearing the word. Mom? What was wrong with this chubby little thing? Did it really think she and it were of the same species? It called her mom? "Listen, little fatty. I'm not your mother. Don't call me that." Upon these words, Yunwoo raised her foot, planning to get it off her pant leg. But it tightly grabbed her pant leg with its little claws, clamping its chubby short legs on her feet. "Mom!" It called her again in a piteous babyish voice, excitedly rubbing its delicate little face against her shank, as if it finally managed to find its mother. It really thought she was its mother? Yunwoo was briefly transfixed with embarrassment. Then she goggled at the chubby little thing clinging to her feet, the corner of her lips twitching. It kept rubbing its face against her shank. Finally, Yunwoo couldn't help bending over and pulling it off her foot, glaring at it. "Little fatty, I told you I'm not your mother." However, before Yunwoo could finish her sentence, that little creature in her hands slid along her arm to her chest like a loach. "Mom!" It exultantly clung to her neck and rubbed its face against her. Yunwoo was speechless with embarrassment, her lips twitching violently. She tried to pull it off her neck, but its grip was so tight that she nearly suffocated. Resigned, Yunwoo had to soften her tone and tried to coax it into coming down. But that little guy yielded to neither the carrot nor the stick. It just kept rubbing against her neck. It was not until it tired after quite a while that it gave up and climbed to the top of her head, gripping onto her hair with its little claws. No matter how hard Yunwoo tried, it refused to come down. Yunwoo was depressed and resigned. However, when Yunwoo saw the liquid in the eggshell, all her depression dissolved instantly. Phoenix saliva? Wasn't that transparent, viscous liquid saliva of a 1,000-year-old phoenix that she had seen in that cavern? Though it was of high levels of stickiness and toxicity, it was very precious, since it could be used to make phoenix saliva pellets that could detoxify any poison. Maybe it would prove useful someday. I should keep it. After collecting that phoenix saliva with great caution, Yunwoo put it into her storage space along with the eggshell. Then she gave a giggle, as if perfectly content. But the little guy on her head watched her in surprise as she did this. Did its mom like its pee very much? She should have told it earlier. If she really liked that, it would give her more in the future. However, if Yunwoo knew that the phoenix saliva, which all people deemed extremely precious, and which she regarded as treasure, was merely its urine, she would no doubt spit blood. Another full day passed. Inside the bottomless pit, a figure, with that chubby reek, Yunwoo gave it this name in commemoration of the name it gave her. Ugly, on her head, was climbing upwards inch by inch, sweating buckets. "You damn reek, stop chewing my hair. I'll throw you down if you don't." After climbing for a full day, she was starving, but she still couldn't see the entrance of this dark pit. How much longer it would take her to climb out of it remained unknown. She had been depressed all along, but that chubby reek on her head kept chewing her hair. It was not actually eating the hair, but when it pulled her hair out of its mouth, it was saliva-soaked, sticky, and very disgusting. At this moment, she heard it chewing her hair again, making tisk sounds, as if the hair was very delicious. Yunwoo couldn't help stretching out her hand and pulling her sticky hair out of its mouth. As if its food was snatched, Reek's lips clamped, its big eyes filled with tears, which made a piteous sight. "Mom!" Depressed and resigned, Yunwoo clenched her teeth, patted on its bald little head, and said in an affectedly threatening tone, "If you call me that again, I'll throw you down." Lips clamped, big eyes filled with tears, Reek withdrew its claws, looking aggrieved and pitiful. "Afraid?" Upon this, as if trying to fawn on her, it started rubbing its plump face against the top of her head, which made it an adorable sight. "You feel afraid? Good. Behave yourself, or else I'll throw you down." Knowing that it was afraid, Yunwoo was in a slightly better mood and resumed climbing. However, before long, tisk, tisk, sounds of Reek's chewing came from the top of her head again. That little guy started gnawing at her hair. "Reek, don't you think that's disgusting?" Yunwoo pulled the hair out of its mouth again. The stickiness of the hair made her feel resigned and speechless. On hearing the rebuke, Reek instantly became obedient again. However, before long, it started again. After a while, Yunwoo felt that her scalp was sticky and wet all over, which terribly disgusted her. But that little thing enjoyed it very much. At first, after Yunwoo reprimanded it, it felt afraid and behaved itself for a while, but now it gnawed on her hair freely and happily. Every time Yunwoo pulled the hair out of its mouth, it started chewing hair on the other side. The more frequently she tried to stop it, the more happily it continued. Eventually, Yunwoo gave up and didn't even bother yelling at it. Chew on it, chew on it, chew on it as long as it wanted. The hair was so dirty. If it liked chewing on it so much, let the hair disgusted it to death. Depressed as Yunwu was, she still kept climbing upwards with great efforts. In fact, she merely intruded into the nest of a phoenix by accident during her fleeing from enemies, but for some inexplicable reason she came by this red egg, out of which this chubby weird creature hatched. She directly became a wet nurse. Was her life easy? Now, it turned out this little guy had such a weird addiction of chewing on people's hair, which made her feel speechless, resigned, and embarrassed. After she climbed out of this pit, the first thing she would do was return it to its mother. Yunwu climbed and climbed. Finally, to her delight, she vaguely felt that the exit was close. But all of a sudden, bomb! A loud explosion was heard and the pit started quaking violently. Yunwu cried out in alarm. The corner of rock standing out from the inside of the pit loosened, and with that she instantaneously started falling down like a kite without the restriction of a string. When she collected herself, Yunwu blurted out a 4-letter word, fuck. Which asshole did this? She pressed her bracer made of silk spun by golden silkworm against the inside of the pit to steady herself but failed. The falling was unstoppable. Was she by any chance destined to spend the rest of her life in this bottomless pit? However, right at this moment, she felt that her hair was given a sharp pull. The pain was so unbearable that Yunwu grimaced and nearly blurted out curses. But her falling instantly stopped at the same moment. It turned out that the little thing lying prostrate on her head was holding on to her hair with its claws, arduously flapping its little wings on its back. But Yunwu was an adult human being, and it seemed to have exerted all its strength, but still could barely stop her from falling down. Heavy, it laboriously uttered a word in a babyish voice. Yunwu couldn't see it, but could feel that it was holding on to her hair, sparing no strength. She could also picture how ridiculous she currently looked hanging in midair. However, taking advantage of this opportunity, she focused her attention on the willow twigs wrapped around her thin waist, exerted her spiritual power and stretched those twigs out, which then firmly adhered to the inside of the pit. Yunwu was hanging in the middle of those willow twigs like a spider on its web. She could control those willow twigs sprouting from her waist with her spiritual power, as if they were part of her, which was very strange. She didn't know whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. All right, we're safe now. You may release your grip. You nearly plucked my hair out. After steadying herself, Yunwu hurriedly stretched out her hand and took that little thing off her head. If it kept pulling so hard, her hair might actually be plucked out. As if very tired, that little thing withdrew its little wings and tamely let her hold it in her hands. It looked at Yunwu with its big, round eyes, and then rubbed its delicate cheeks against her palms, saying, "Mom, tired." After that, like a loach, it crawled along her arm to her chest, and then boldly wormed its way into her clothes and settled itself comfortably in there. Before long, faint snores came from her chest. The expression on Yunwu's face was a mixture of resignation and speechlessness. Did this little guy really regard her as its mother? Bomb. A distant sound of the ground quaking was vaguely heard. Yunwu furrowed her brow. What is going on out there exactly? There was a magic beast forest called Maple Ridge between the Zhou Kingdom and the Longshu Kingdom. This Maple Ridge was an out-of-the-way place on the border between the two kingdoms. However, the rear of the Maple Ridge bordered on the depths of the magic beasts forest in the north, so magic beasts in this forest were all high-level ones. There was even a rumor saying that a phoenix suddenly materialized in that forest a few years ago, and all humans had been forbidden to approach that forest. Any human who entered that forest would end up dead. Therefore, during the past few years, though there had been wars between the two kingdoms, the Maple Ridge remained unaffected. But on this day, outside the Maple Ridge, on a vast and bleak battleground, a war between humans and magic beasts was about to start. Under normal circumstances, only magic beasts at Tier 6 and above possessed intelligence. Those at levels below Tier 6 only launched attack when they were trying to catch prey or when humans intruded into their territories, just like common beasts. But now, on this battleground, this scene was seen. Numerous magic beasts formed up into orderly ranks behind a female, as if following their leader. Human also dispatched massive armies here, standing on the other side. The two sides were confronting each other. Tension on the battleground was rapidly reaching flashpoint, as if the war might break out at any moment. Despicable humans, hand over my child. The phoenix thundered with extreme anger, glaring at those dozens of 100,000 human troops. The moment she finished the last word, those magic beasts behind her roared in unison. Roar, with a tremendous momentum. The roar made the welkin ring. There were several commanders leading the human armies, but the commander-in-chief was a fairly handsome, middle-aged man who was in his early 40s. Phoenix, as a divine beast, you should know there are rules in mortal realm. You've already killed all those humans who intruded into your territory that night. The missing of your child doesn't concern other humans. Humph, doesn't concern other humans? You humans are greedy and despicable by nature. It was definitely you humans who took my child away from me. If you don't hand over my child to me, I'll throw the whole mortal realm into eternal chaos. That night, humans were the only intruders apart from the black dragon. She remembered that back then a human teenage girl intruded into her nest. It must be when the black dragon swirled up the magma that the teenage girl stole her child. As a result, during the past more than a month, magic beasts in the Maple Ridge had invaded border cities of Zhou Kingdom and Longshu Kingdom several times. They ruthlessly killed all humans they caught sight of, no matter they were residents of Zhou Kingdom or Longshu Kingdom. After over a month's invasion, Zhou Kingdom was finally driven beyond forbearance and dispatched massive armies here. The previous earth-shaking explosions were caused by shells fired by two mighty cannons transferred here from the Imperial City. Bomb. When Yunwu finally managed to climb out of that bottomless pit, another explosion was heard, quaking the ground. Unlike the muffled sound she heard in the bottomless pit, this explosion was extremely distinct. Yunwu wiped the sweat off her forehead and couldn't help mumbling, "A cannon? There are actually such things as cannons existing in this exotic world?" But the explosion seemed to be accompanied by vague sounds of people fighting. She felt that the source of the sounds was very far away. "Mom!" A babyish voice came from her chest. Yunwu lowered her head and watched that little guy which had just craned its round head out of her clothes, opening its sleepy big eyes. It seemed to be the sound of artillery that woke it up. It rubbed its eyes with its little claws, pouted its little two-fanged mouth, and gave a murmur. What an adorable creature. Heart melted. Yunwu couldn't help intending to stretch out her hand to pinch its chubby little face. This little thing seemed like a human, but was not. The red feathers on it converted into wings, but it didn't look like a phoenix at all. She had no idea what this species was, but this chubby little thing was a pretty cute sight. Hungry, hungry. Suddenly, Reek raised its head and piteously looked at Yunwu with its big, round, and liquid eyes. Hungry? That made sense. Even she herself was starving. This little thing had merely chewed on her hair, but hadn't eaten anything after its birth. No wonder it was hungry. But what did this little thing feed on? Milk? Meat? Or worms? Boom, boom. While Yunwu was contemplating, another two booms was heard. The source of them seemed to be outside the forest. "Mom, hungry." Okay, I'll get you something to eat." Yunwu flicked a glance in the direction of that explosion and then ignored it, planning to find some food to fill their bellies. On hearing this, little Reek looked very happy. The little fatty crawled out of her clothes and soon expertly climbed up her neck to the top of her head. Ahead, ahead. Savory, savory. It yelled in a babyish voice, holding on to her hair. Yunwu, whose hair was gripped and under command, felt depressed and resigned, because she suddenly felt that it was riding her like riding a horse. But she still headed for the ahead that it mentioned, planning to find out what that savory it said was. However, what she didn't know was that she and that little thing on her head were the cause of that war between humans and magic beasts outside the forest. In the Luo City, Master, all scouts reported. There was still no news. Lingqi, who was wearing a mask, respectfully reported to the person sitting on a chair. However, the atmosphere in the room seemed to be chilly. The master's heavy mood could be distinctly felt. What about the maple ridge? Holding a teacup, Long Qingxie slowly took a sip, raised his head in a seemingly demonic manner, and flicked a glance at Lingqi. His magnetic voice was very calm and bland. But only those who knew him well were aware that the more calm and bland he appeared, the angrier he actually was. Lingqi lowered his head and respectfully replied, "On the sight of humans, magic beasts in the Maple Ridge go furious and try to eat and kill them. Several members of the search team sent there has been killed. Because of that, Phoenix, they haven't been able to enter the forest to search for clues during the past over a month." After saying this, Lingqi involuntarily raised her head, watched Long Qingxia and added, "Master, it has been over a month. If that lady really entered the Maple Ridge, then she must have either fled or—" He broke off in the middle of a sentence, because he seemed to have felt the chilly, bloodthirsty aura about his master. "Please simmer down, master." "I shouldn't have said that," Lingqi hurriedly said. Long Qingxia slightly curved his sexy, thin lips, but the smile on them was glacial. In a cold voice he said, "Leave. Go get your punishment." Lingqi nodded and said, "Yes." After that, Lingqi turned around and took his leave. But he was very curious about that girl. Having been serving his master for 12 years, he knew very well that his master was a man with lofty ambitions, that before the time was right, he would always make sure the situation was well in hand and consolidate at every step. But during the past over a month, in order to find that girl, his master even dispatched the forces that he had been hiding all along. What kind of girl was she exactly? How come his master cared about her so much? A figure was swishing in the forest. Which part of the depths of this forest was she going to? Yunwu didn't know. Anyway, she was going in the direction that the little thing on her head was pointing to. They arrived at a place where there were thistles and thorns all around. It was rather dark in this forest, and there was a faint air of mystery and danger around this place. Savory, savory. Little Reek on her head took a few sniffs, stretched out its chubby little claw, and pointed at the depths of the bush surrounded by thorns in front of them. "Stop saying savory. Can you see these thorns as dense as spider webs? They're poisonous. What is it that you little thing want to find exactly?" Watching those thorny bushes, Yunwu said sourly to Little Reek, which was still waving its claws on her head. She looked around and found that the area within a 10-mile radius around this place was probably full of thorns, that she would have to slash her way through these thorns if she wanted to get to the depths. Savory. Right at this moment, Little Reek on her head suddenly jumped down. It toddled towards those thorny bushes on its chubby little legs. Yunwu was startled, saying, "Reek, you want to become a hedgehog?" However, before her voice died away, that little thing raised its head and took a deep breath. Pooh. With a sneeze-like sound, it suddenly breathed a line of fire out of its little mouth, which shot straight through the bushes like a fire dragon. Instantly, the fire dragon devoured all thorns in its way, and with that a path appeared. Seeing that there was a path now, Little Reek grinned, revealing its wicked-looking fangs, and then happily said to Yunwu, "Mom, savory." After that, before Yunwu reacted, it joyously toddled straight towards the depths of the bush on its chubby little legs. In the blink of an eye, its figure went out of her sight. "Hey, Reek, wait a moment." Seeing this, Yunwu hurriedly rushed forward. Along the path made by that little thing with fire, she went squarely into the depths of the bushes. However, though she had tried to catch up at a very fast speed, she didn't see that little guy's figure. In the depths of those bushes, there was a dense wood, and the path branched off in several directions. "Reek." Standing at the intersection, Yunwu yelled, but there was no response. "That damn Reek. Its legs are short and fat. How come it disappeared so soon?" Yunwu frowned. Resigned, she randomly took one of those paths. It was dark, and fog started showing up around. After only a few steps, the path branched off in several directions again. It seemed as if she was in a maze. What the hell was this place? However, right on cue, an inexplicably pleasant smell wafted over, which gladdened her heart and refreshed her mind. Yunwu lifted her eyebrows and followed the scent. A land of idyllic beauty? Along a winding path, she walked through a wood of giant, ancient trees and arrived at a valley of idyllic beauty. There were flowers, pools, and also a small pavilion. Apparently, somebody built this secluded place. Among everything in this valley, the giant, ancient tree in the middlemost position of the valley was the most intrusive. Its trunk was so thick that even 10 people opening their arms hand in hand wouldn't be able to encircle it. The source of that fragrance was the fruits on that gigantic tree, which were colorful, of strange shapes and giving off a special fragrance. That fragrance was really tempting, especially for Yunwu, who had been starving for a long time. She swallowed hard and could barely subdue her urge to rush over, pick a couple of those fruits and gobble them down. But she had just raised her foot when she saw a magic beast on the other side of the valley out of the corner of her eye. It had a tiger's head and a condor's body, which looked familiar to Yunwu. Wasn't it a tiger condor, a specimen of which she had once seen in the magic beast's forest in the north? Why was a tiger condor here? And it seemed as if that tiger condor had died not long before. Mom. Savory. Yunwu was contemplating with a frown on her face when a babyish voice came from that gigantic tree. She flicked a careful look at the tree and saw that fatty Reek sitting on a branch amid dense foliage was gnawing away at a red fruit in its hands, its little legs dangling. Yunwu cast a resigned glimpse at it. But she didn't walk up to the tree, but turned and headed for that tiger condor. Though her strength had been fully restored after that sleep she had had in the bottomless pit, and she had no uncomfortable feelings, she still had to drink beast blood whenever she had the chance, just in case, since her body hadn't revived yet. This tiger condor was in middle stage of Tier 5. There were no wounds caused by fight in its body, except for 2 tiny, almost undetectable tooth marks in its neck. Who else could have done this apart from that little guy? Yunwu felt that this was very strange. Was Reek not a descendant of a phoenix? It could breathe fire, but other than that, she really didn't see this little thing was a phoenix descendant. Instead, it was more like a baby zombie. Little Reek, who was enjoying the fruit on the tree, suddenly paused. It blinked its big eyes, tilted its little head and looked at Yunwu, who was drinking beast blood down below. A confused look on its face. What is Mom doing? Feeling that she had drunk enough blood, Yunwu stood up and wiped her mouth. The lingering smell of blood in her mouth disgusted her, but she ignored it and flashed straight towards the giant tree. She casually plucked a white fruit about the size of a honey peach and took a bite of it. So refreshing. Immediately, the refreshing, juicy flesh of the fruit, as well as the pleasant scent of it, dissolved the foul smell of blood in her mouth. Yunwu's eyes involuntarily lit up. Reek, you little thing are really a picky eater. This fruit tastes so good. No wonder you had me travel so far to come here. Let's have some more. Yunwu gobbled down the fruit, feeling both amazed and delighted at its delicious taste. On hearing Yunwu's compliment, little Reek grinned, revealing its wicked-looking, sharp teeth, which made it a congenitally ferocious sight. However, Yunwu's attention was on those colorful fruits, so she didn't notice this. Unknowingly, Yunwu consumed over 10 fruits, but she was still not full. Instead, the more she ate, the more she wanted to eat more. These fruits are so good. I should take them all. When I get back, I can give some to Grandma Medicine and Little Leaf, and that man, too. Thinking about this, Yunwu started plucking those fruits like crazy. When Yunwu leaped onto the ground, the tree, which was originally full of fruits, had not a single fruit left on it. Little Reek had eaten 4 or 5 red fruits and was full. At this moment, it also climbed down the tree with its claws and chubby little legs. Have you had enough? Yunwu lowered her head and looked at the little guy. The little guy nodded, looking robust and vigorous. It raised its big, round eyes, watched Yunwu and stroked its full belly, saying, "Full? What an adorable sight. That's good. Let's go. I'll take you to your mother." Yunwu subdued her urge to pinch its cute, chubby face. After saying this, She turned around, face full of satisfaction. She had eaten her fill and also packed a lot of fruits into her storage space. So of course she was in a good mood. Mother? On hearing this, little Reek tilted its head and thought for a while, but failed to figure out the meaning of that word. But it still joyously followed Yunwu on its chubby little legs. When they were passing the tiger condor, little Reek suddenly stopped, as if something had just occurred to it. Yunwu noticed that there hadn't been any footsteps behind her for quite a while. She couldn't help turning her head back and took a look. Little Reek, what are you doing? Yunwu said with a frown on her face when she saw the little thing lying prostrate on the tiger condor's body. The little guy jumped off the tiger condor, looked at Yunwu and repeatedly shook its head like shaking a rattle, knitting its eyebrows tightly together. It's awful and foul. Mom, don't drink it again. At first Yunwu didn't quite understand why it did that. After hearing its words, light suddenly dawned on her. It was imitating what she had just done. Yunwu pulled a wry face. She drank beast blood because she had to, but this little guy imitated her purely out of curiosity. Little Reek, you little thing, be careful about what you try to imitate from now on. Don't just blindly imitate everything others do. Upon these words, Yunwu turned around, walked over, and picked it up. Being held in Yunwu's arms, it was very happy. Mom, it said excitedly in a babyish voice. Yunwu's heart was slightly melted. What is it? I'm hungry. What? Yunwu was stunned. Didn't it say that it was full just a moment ago? She lowered her head and was just about to ask when that little guy in her arms opened its mouth full of sharp fangs and bit into her shoulder extremely ferociously. Yunwu's face changed due to the stabbing pain and abruptly tried to throw it away. But its two little claws gripped her clothes. She not only failed to throw it away, but also caused her shoulder to be slit by its claws, blood gushing out. That little guy drank even more happily. Blood vessels rippled beneath the skin of Yunwu's forehead. For an instant, she could scarcely suppress an urge to strangle this weird creature. Tisk, tisk. Totally unaware of this, little Reek drank even quicker, clicking its tongue. The burning pain on her shoulder made Yunwu feel both depressed and annoyed, her eyes ablaze with anger. Little Reek, Yunwu thundered and stretched out her hand, attempting to pull it off her shoulder. But the moment she touched it, sizzle, its body temperature seemed to be as high as 8 million degrees Celsius. Her palm instantly blistered. It was so hot. Yunwu's eyes were full of astonishment. Staring at little Reek, who was still drinking her blood, she inexplicably felt restless and anxious. What kind of monster was it? That was clearly a phoenix egg, but this guy not only didn't look like a phoenix, but also liked drinking human blood. While Yunwu was agitated, she suddenly felt a pang of burning pain in her shoulder. That pain was somewhat familiar. Yunwu was suddenly stunned. The primal fire? Right on cue, 1/3 of the primal fire in her body was instantly sucked by it. It was sucking the primal fire in her body? Burp. As if it finally had enough, the little guy on her shoulder let go and gave a loud belch. 1/3 of the primal fire disappeared from her body. Feeling the change in her body, Yunwu couldn't help but frown, glaring at little Reek, who was in her arms. Seeming to have sensed her anger, little Reek flicked a piteous look at her with its liquid big eyes, pulled her clothes with its little claws, and then rubbed itself against her chest. Was it acting pitiable? Looking at its affectedly pitiful look, Yunwu tried hard to suppress her annoyance. However, right at this moment, all of a sudden, a pang of burning pain clutched at her shoulder, as if something was corroding her body. The pain was so sharp that she broke out in a cold sweat. Confused, little Reek tilted its head and looked at Yunwu's face. Seeing that she seemed to be in great pain, it knitted its little eyebrows. And then, it stretched out its little claw and patted on the wound in her shoulder. It's okay. It's okay. Its voice was babyish, but it was imitating an adult's tone. Yunwu pulled a wry face in depression. All of a sudden, a dull red light instantly flashed out of the wound in Yunwu's shoulder and abruptly shrouded both of them in it. Little Reek's chubby claw was slit open by something, and its blood was dripping down onto the wound in her shoulder. Their blood mixed with each other, and with that a small cloud of dull red blood shot out of the wound and landed beside Yuan-Wu's feet. Surprisingly, it twisted itself and formed into a complex, bizarre circle giving off a cold and a hot chi, both of which were mysterious and ancient. Seeing this sudden change, Yuan-Wu stood transfixed with shock for quite a while. Is this by any chance? After arriving at this exotic world, she had read a lot of books on general history and seen patterns similar to this circle in one of them. Wasn't this circle the long-lost? An indenture circle? An amazed voice came from inside the pendant, as if the speaker had just waken up from a deep sleep. An indenture circle? Was this really an indenture circle peculiar to summoners? Elder White, you woke up. Yuan-Wu, who had been in shock, said in surprise and delight after hearing the voice. But meanwhile, a beam of scarlet light and another one of black light abruptly shot upwards into the sky from the circle, as if connecting the welkin and the earth. Right at this moment, all magic beasts in this forest raised their heads in awe and looked in the direction of Yuan-Wu as if by tacit agreement. Some low-level magic beasts even prostrated themselves, trembling, horror and panic glinting in their eyes. In the innermost area of the magic beasts' forest in the north, in that cave, an old man, who was sitting cross-legged like a statue, abruptly opened his eyes when the two beams of light shot into the sky. A puzzled look flashed across his old eyes of wisdom. An indenture circle? Looking in the direction of somewhere outside the forest, he knitted his white eyebrows. A summoner? How come there is chi of a summoner's birth? At this moment, a middle-aged hurriedly waked into the cave. Master Shifu. A vision suddenly appeared in the sky. It seems to be in the direction of our ambrosian fruits orchard. A middle-aged man walked inside and said urgently, "Last time, they were late and somebody stole the flame fruit soon after its ripening." He calculated the time and found that those ambrosian fruits in the ambrosian fruits orchard would soon ripen. Just now, there had been a sudden vision in the sky above the orchard, so the middle-aged man naturally went nervous. The old man stood up and cast a glance in the direction of that vision with his eyes which had witnessed vicissitudes of his life, a somewhat solemn look on his face. "Go there and check." "Yes, yes," the middle-aged answered. The moment he walked out of the cave, with a sudden move of his figure, he disappeared into thin air. However, after thinking for a while, as if concerned, the old man also walked out of the cave and vanished on the spot after a flick of his body. The moment the two beams of light shot into the sky, Yuan-Wu had this weird feeling that there was a close identity between her existence and that of the welkin and that of the earth. She felt as if she was capable of controlling the welkin and the earth if she wanted to, as if she was the dominator of them. Was this how it felt to be a summoner? This feeling was so tempting. However, the light soon turned into a crimson, dazzlingly luminous sphere, split into two parts. One of them shot into Yuan-Wu's forehead, and the other into Little Reek's. She felt a sudden constriction in her forefinger, as if something had just clasped it. Yuan-Wu involuntarily lowered her head and took a look. To her surprise, a crimson ring had appeared around her forefinger out of thin air. Was this by any chance, like what legend had it, an indenture ring which was a symbol of the identity as a summoner? Right at that moment, a sudden pang of stabbing pain clutched at Yuan-Wu's head, and with that pieces of information flooded into her mind. A summoner? An equal indenture? The general meaning of those pieces of information was that she had comprehended an indenture circle of her own which had indentured Little Reek, that she had become a summoner. There was also a long piece of information that she didn't quite understand, but she believed the meaning of it was probably similar to that of other information. However, her body still hadn't revived yet. How come she became a summoner and also indentured this little guy? She had a lot of confusions, but couldn't figure them out no matter how hard she tried. Since an indenture had been signed, an unbreakable bond had also been forged between her and Little Reek. Yuan-Wu could even feel the change of Little Reek's mood, as well as its fighting capability without verbal communication with it. Yes, She could feel its fighting capability, which was amazing. However, this little reek's fighting capability was zero. It had no fighting capability at all. Yunwu was embarrassed. No matter what, wasn't it a descendant of a phoenix? How come it had no fighting capability? Wasn't this guy too weak? Mom, seeming to have felt that the relationship between it and Yunwu had just become closer, little Reek grinned happily. When it grinned, its sharp fangs were revealed, which startled Yunwu. Fine. Though it had no fighting capability, at least its fangs made it seem ferocious enough. In the future, when she encountered an enemy she couldn't defeat, she could just ask it to reveal its fangs, and hopefully the enemy would be scared. Totally unaware of her thought, little Reek smiled even more brightly. Elder White, what happened to you? You've been quiet for such a long time. After the indenture was reached, Yunwu didn't stay there. Carrying the little guy who kept trying to rub itself against her chest and acting cute, Yunwu couldn't help ask this question while walking towards the periphery of the forest. In the pendant, that aged voice gave a resigned sigh. I don't know either. I just feel that the seal has become much firmer recently. It seems as if I'm going to be sealed again. You're going to be sealed again? Hasn't I removed the seal already? Yunwu frowned. I don't know what is going on either. Now the seal is restoring itself bit by bit. If it weren't for that you just comprehended an indenture circle and woke me up, maybe I'll be sealed while asleep. How did this happen? Elder White, I've already become a summoner. Do you think I can indenture you? You can't. Your body still hasn't revived yet. Elder White's aged voice sounded somewhat resigned. Her body still hasn't revived? Was it by any chance because her body hadn't revived and she hadn't indentured him that the seal began to restore itself? Thinking about this, Yunwu inexplicably felt a little anxious. If that was the case, she had to find Long Qingxia and return to the imperial city as soon as possible. Yunwu had just walked out of the forest when miscellaneous loud sounds of fighting were heard. What the hell was going on? Was that fight outside the nest of the phoenix that night by any chance still ongoing? It had been so long. They still hadn't finished fighting? What she didn't know was that two figures had just appeared in midair above that orchard. When the middle-aged man caught sight of the fruit tree, all fruits on which had been plucked without even an unripe one left, as well as the body of the tiger condor, his face became so black that it seemed as if some kind of black liquid was about to ooze out of it. Who did this? Which despicable bastard stooped to theft again and again? I'll tear you to pieces. A growl accompanied by a potent chi instantly rippled outwards. Once again, panic spread through magic beasts in the area within a 100-mile radius around the orchard. The face of the old man standing in midair also darkened when he saw that all fruits on the tree had been stolen. Find that person. You must find the thief even if you have to search every inch of this area. There was extreme anger in the old man's voice. Yes. Outside the Maple Ridge, the war between humans and magic beasts had begun. Roars of magic beasts, boom of cannons, sounds of hand-to-hand fighting. Even the air was filled with smell of blood. With sharp claws and fangs as their weapons, magic beasts' fighting capability was very potent. Humans' fighting capability was relatively lower, but they were able to use fighting spirit to defend themselves, and they also had weapons such as swords and cannons. Lying prostrate on a branch of a big tree on the verge of the forest, Yunwu couldn't help clicking her tongue when she saw the intense battle happening on the vast battleground. She had thought that the fight outside the phoenix nest that night had been still ongoing. Unexpectedly, it was a massive battle between a human army and magic beasts. This scene was much more wonderful than that confrontation between the Ouyang family and the Murong family in the magic beasts forest that day. She saw that not far away, a magic beast directly slit open a man's belly, his bloody intestines dropping down. On another side, a soldier's fighting spirit surged out and smashed a magic beast's head, its brains splashing around. How gory the battle was. But Yunwu felt inexplicably excitement well up inside her, as if her blood was boiling. Why was she feeling this? Yunwu had no idea. She just felt that she enjoyed this bloody scene very much. A faint purple light gleamed in her purple eyes. Suddenly, Little Reek in her arms widened its big eyes, tilted its little head and looked at Yunwu, as if surprised. Yunwu was staring in the direction of the battleground, ignoring it. As a result, she didn't notice that a purple light also flashed across its big, round eyes. Excitement and a thirst for blood flashed across its big eyes, and with that it opened its little red mouth, raised its head and let out a piercing, ferocious phoenix cry. Clang! The phoenix cry emanated right from Yunwu's chest, and it nearly perforated her eardrum, causing a sharp pain in her head. Was it crazy? Originally, Yunwu had intended to quietly enjoy the scene of the battle. Now her plan was ruined. The moment Phoenix, who was leading magic beasts fighting with humans, heard the cry, all her attention was distracted from the battle. She turned her head back and looked in the direction of the source of the cry. Her eyes rested squarely on Yunwu. Even dense foliage was unable to block her view. When she saw the little guy in Yunwu's arms, her beautiful eyes abruptly widened. That was her child? But how did it hatch out? To hatch a phoenix egg, a phoenix must stay beside the egg and let the egg absorb its heat. This was the only way. But due to the intrinsic mother-child bond, she knew that was her child. Human, give me my child back. Phoenix's angry voice resounded around the whole battlefield. Her red figure leaped upwards, transformed into its original beast form, which was a fiery red phoenix, and then let out a resonant, piercing phoenix cry, making the welkin ring. In her eyes, Yunwu must be the human who had despicably snatched her baby. Even tearing Yunwu to pieces wouldn't be enough to dissolve her anger. Watching that murderous phoenix swooping towards her, Yunwu, hiding in dense foliage, was terrified by the intense killing aura. Without a single moment's hesitation, Yunwu took a flying leap and shot towards the chaotic battleground. Clang! Seeing that Yunwu was taking her to the battleground, Little Reek in her arms was very excited. It raised its head and let out another piercing phoenix squeak. You brat still dare to squeak? It was all your fault. Feeling that the phoenix was pursuing her hotly and spewing flames, Yunwu was terribly anxious. She enveloped herself in wind element and started swishing around aimlessly on the battlefield. Little Reek in her arms had no intention of correcting its mistakes. Instead, as if excited by this chase, it started squeaking again. Yunwu itched to strangle it with her bare hands. She subconsciously stretched out her hand and directly clamped it on its little mouth, which had small zombie fangs revealing outside the lips. On seeing this, the female phoenix widened her eyes and let out an extremely angry squeak which resounded around the whole battlefield. Human, let go of my child. Give me my child back. The sound waves of the female phoenix's roar was so powerful that Yunwu nearly spat blood, a sharp pain in her eardrums. Little Reek was enjoying this very much. Though Yunwu was covering its mouth, it was happily waving its two little claws, which were not too sharp, its chubby little legs kicking around constantly. It looked like a puppy swimming, but in outsiders' sight, it seemed as if Yunwu kidnapped this little guy which was madly struggling. Clash! The female phoenix let out an extremely angry shriek which made the welkin ring, as if even wind and clouds were changing their directions due to this scream. The female phoenix started spewing lances of flames, but she didn't dare to hit Yunwu for fear that the flame might hurt her child. Flustered, Yunwu kept rushing madly. Wherever there was a way, she took it. The battlefield was so vast that she had no idea which part of it she was in. However, at this moment, all fighting on the battleground stopped. Both magic beasts and humans concentrated all their attention on that kidnapped phoenix baby and that girl in black, who was fleeing on the battlefield. Who was she? However, no matter who she was, anybody who saw her coming in their direction dodged aside as quick as possible. Because wherever she went, flames spewed by the female phoenix flying in midair would soon follow. Those who failed to dodge in time, no matter magic beasts or humans, were instantly toasted. Seeing that all magic beasts and humans were avoiding her, which left her nowhere to hide, Yunwu felt resigned and depressed. Give me my child back. In midair, the phoenix was hotly pursuing her, breathing fire, eyes wide with rage. Yunwu felt that sooner or later she would become a roast human if things kept going this way. After flicking a glance at the little guy in her arms, which was happily waving its claws and kicking its chubby legs, she began to wonder whether she should just return this guy to that phoenix. Though it was her indentured beast, this little guy's fighting capability was zero, and now she was about to be exhausted to death trying to flee from its mother who was chasing her and trying to kill her, but this little guy was having so much fun. Did it have any idea that it was indentured to her? It seemed as if this guy regarded her as a nanny. Thinking of this, Yunwu, who had been swishing around rapidly, abruptly stopped. Seeing that the phoenix was spewing another pike of fire towards her, Yunwu grabbed little Reek and lifted it up above her head. Wait! Yunwu, who was panting heavily, let out a cry which resounded through this bloody battlefield. Fortunately, the phoenix stopped in time. Otherwise, the giggling little guy, which had no idea what was going on, and which thought that Yunwu was just teasing it, would have been toasted. What a vicious human! The female phoenix transformed herself into a woman, an angry and murderous look on her face, glaring at Yunwu who was using her child as a shield. Vicious? What kind of vicious thing did she do? This little Reek had devoured 1/3 of the primal fire. There was no way the flames spewed by her could hurt it. However, Yunwu scorned to argue with her. She raised the chubby little guy in her hands, as if she was doing weightlifting. You've been demanding the return of your son all along, so I'll just give it back to you. Actually, I've been meaning to return it to you all the time, but you yelled at me and tried to kill me the moment you saw me, which made my heart lurch, so I started running, Yunwu said in a loud voice, bold and straight. However, judging by the look on her face, she wasn't scared at all. On hearing this, the female phoenix went even angrier, and even those standing in the distance could sense her anger. A red figure flashed down and snatched that little guy from Yunwu's hands as quick as she could. In a seemingly relieved voice, Yunwu said, "All right, now you got your kid back. For the record, whatever it is that is going to happen in the future has nothing to do with me." After saying this, with a twitch of her hand, Yunwu turned around and left. She did this in such an elegant and unrestrained manner that anybody living in modern society, had they seen this, would be reminded of that sentence in a famous poem, "I waved my hand and brought no cloud with me." However, she had just taken one step forward and the leg behind was still on the ground when something grabbed it. She lowered her head and took a look. She saw that little Reek was tightly holding on to her pant leg and staring fixedly up at her with its big round eyes filled with tears, a pitiful look on its face. "Mom!" Its babyish, tearful voice was quivering, as if it was a child whose parents were abandoning it. Yunwu was speechless with embarrassment, her lips twitching violently. She was really not a wet nurse. She had no breast milk for this little guy. Would anybody please take this little fatty away? However, the phoenix darted a murderous look at Yunwu when she heard the little guy calling her mom. The look on the phoenix's face instantly switched from anger to iciness, and there was intense killing intent at the bottom of her eyes. If her gaze were able to kill, Yunwu would probably have been torn to pieces by now. "Reek, get your claws off me." Yunwu hurriedly darkened her face and thundered for fear that the phoenix might take action. But little Reek ignored her yell and her angry face. It not only grabbed her pant leg with its claws, but also clamped its chubby little legs around her shank like a Chinese donut. Pouting its little mouth, it called in a tearful voice, "Mom, Mom." This brat still dared to call her mom. Any woman who saw her child regarding another woman as mother would get furious and try to kill that woman. A murderous, wrathful look flashed across the phoenix's eyes. This time, Yunwu's heart really lurched. There was a saying which said that inviting a god to one's home is easy, but having the god leave is difficult. This little guy had come to her on its own account. Why was it still so difficult to have it go back home? Beneath the murderous gaze of the phoenix, Yunwu was horrified. Eventually, resigned, she secretly clenched her teeth, stretched her hand into her sleeve and fished out a big, red fruit out of her storage space. In outsiders' eyes, it seemed as if the fruit had been stored in her sleeve. Here you are. This is the last one I got. Take this and go with your own mother. Don't follow me. Understand? The moment Yunwu took out the crimson fruit, a gratifying and refreshing fragrance spread out. A single sniff of it made people feel comfortable and relaxed. The moment the phoenix saw the fruit taken out by Yunwu, her pupils contracted noticeably and a flash of amazement crossed the bottom of her eyes. A crimson ambrosian fruit? She was merely a human. How come she had a crimson ambrosian fruit? Crimson ambrosian fruits contained concentrated fire element. Ambrosian fruit trees blossomed every 1,000 years, and it took them an extra millennium to yield. So this kind of fruit was very precious and very rare even in the realm of divine beasts, not to mention in the mortal realm. For fire-attributed magic beasts, crimson ambrosian fruit was very nourishing. It could also help a magic beast make a breakthrough when the beast was evolving. If a fire-attributed human ingested this kind of fruit, not only would his or her fire-attributed constitution be strengthened, but also his or her power would double. Crimson ambrosian fruits were especially precious for human alchemists, because even a single droplet of crimson ambrosian fruit juice could add amazing property to the product. Surprisingly, this human gave a whole crimson ambrosian fruit to her child. The killing intent in her eyes unnoticeably abetted to a large extent. However, what she didn't know was that Yunwu, who had poor discernment, merely felt that this fruit was refreshing and crisp. Back then she gobbled down over 10 fruits to fill her belly. She didn't feel anything unusual after eating them, so she didn't think much. Of course, Yunwu took all the fruits from that tree and stored them in her storage space, the total number of which was 50 to 60 at the smallest, regardless of their colors. So she generously gave one to this little guy and didn't feel that it was a painful loss at all. Little Reek was indifferent to Yunwu's generosity. It clung on to her pant leg, raised its chubby face and looked at Yunwu, shaking its head, big eyes full of tears. No. Yunwu's lips twitched. Did this brat by any chance feel that one fruit was not enough? It had indeed seen her take all those fruits. She stretched her hand into the other sleeve, produced another big fruit which was blue, then passed it to the little guy, saying, "This is the last one. Behave yourself. Don't be too greedy." The phoenix's pupils contracted again as she saw the fruit. Astonishment gleamed in her eyes. A water ambrosian fruit? This human also had a water ambrosian fruit? But little Reek still shook its head, saying no. Finally, Yunwu's face went angry. She glared at it. "You brat. What is it that you want exactly? Why did it cling on to her when its natural mother was right beside it? Did she really look like a wet nurse so much?" Yunwu was very resigned and depressed. However, she still stooped down, roughly grabbed it, raised it and stuffed the 2 big fruits into the arms of the little guy, which was pouting and looking at her with cute, pitiful and fluid eyes. "Stay with your mom and behave yourself. Someday when you're weaned, I'll come back to pick you up," said Yunwu, as if coaxing a kid. After saying this, with a twitch of her hand, she directly threw it at the phoenix, regardless of whether it had understood or not. "Leave here right now, and remember to teach it how to behave, so it won't mistake someone else as a wet nurse. Doesn't it have any idea that will embarrass others? I'm still single." After hearing Yunwu's words, the phoenix also felt depressed. Her child chose a human over her, and so many people saw this. She was terribly embarrassed. But this human sounded as if she was the one to be blamed for all this. And she couldn't even contradict her, which was very annoying. But the phoenix didn't hesitate. As if worried that her child might follow this human and leave her, she carried little Reek, leaped upwards, turned into a fiery red phoenix and flew away immediately. However, before leaving, she raised her head and let out a commanding, piercing scream which instantly rippled through the whole battleground. Clang! On hearing the piercing scream, all magic beasts on the battlefield, both injured ones and unharmed ones, quickly retreated into the forest like a tide. Before long, not a single magic beast could be seen on the battlefield, except for those dead ones on the ground. Yunwu looked in the direction of the phoenix's receding figure. When she withdrew her gaze, a relieved look appeared on her face. How could she not feel relieved when that little thing that kept calling her mom was no longer around? She leisurely turned around and planned to return to Luo City. But the moment she turned around, she saw hundreds of thousands of troops in front of her, eyes of every one of whom were fixed on her. In those eyes gleamed surprise, curiosity, and puzzlement. They were all sizing her up. Being watched by so many people, Yunwu furrowed her eyebrows. At this moment, an officer followed by a couple of soldiers walked up to her. "May I ask you something, lady?" Yunwu flicked a glimpse at the man who was barely in his 30s, crossed her arms across her chest, and said in a languid, bland voice, "What is it? Who are you? Was it you who stole the egg of the phoenix?" The officer queried in a commanding voice, sizing her up with piercing eyes. It sounded more like an interrogation than a query. Yunwu peered at the clothing that officer was wearing and believed that he was probably a deputy general. She curved her lips in a half-smile. "Deputy General, why am I having this feeling that you're not asking me but interrogating me? What's going on here? You want to interrogate me on this battlefield? Did I kill anybody or burn anybody's house? Or did I rob your family members?" On hearing this, that deputy general frowned and his face slightly darkened. "Lady, in a circumstance like this, you're still in the mood for joking? Do you have any idea how many residents and our soldiers got killed because of what you did?" After hearing this, Yunwu lifted her eyebrows, but a flash of apathy crossed the bottom of her eyes. Because of what she did? Had she done anything? Even if she had, given her manner and style, it was not a deputy general's place to interrogate her like interrogating a prisoner, not to mention that she hadn't done anything. Besides, she didn't know about these things at all. "So Deputy General is telling me that I should have a sad look on my face because of all those people who got killed, aren't you? It is just that there's one thing that I don't quite understand. Did those people's deaths have anything to do with me? Did their deaths have anything to do with you? Do you know that the very reason why they were killed was because you stole the phoenix egg?" Yunwu pretended that light had suddenly dawned on her. She raised her eyes and looked at that deputy general. "Oh, now I understand. So Deputy General is saying it is those who stole the phoenix egg that deserve death penalty. But I want to ask Deputy General, how can you be so sure that I was the one who stole the phoenix egg? I mean, even you and these hundreds of thousands of troops couldn't steal the egg from the phoenix. You actually think that a little girl like me, whose arms and legs are so thin, somehow managed to steal the egg from that divine beast? Does Deputy General by any chance think that all these troops of yours are just a bunch of good-for-nothing fatheads who can't even compare with a little girl? Or does Deputy General think that I'm a reincarnation of some god who is more powerful than all these troops combined? If the latter is the case, that will be a huge compliment I don't deserve, and I will feel flattered and honored." It seemed as if Qinling hadn't expected that this black-faced little girl was so eloquent and cunning. After hearing her words, he was at a loss what to say, because it would always be his fault no matter how he answered those rhetorical questions. Instantly, he felt embarrassed and was unable to find a way out of this awkward situation. "Deputy General Chen, General-in-Chief Yuan asked you to invite this lady, but you started chatting with her. This is not the right thing to do." However, right at this moment, a mild, amused voice came. A tall and straight figure not far away was walking towards them at a steady pace. The man was about 35 or 36, looking refined, elegant, and very amiable, a big smile on his face. He was wearing a gray robe instead of a military uniform, which made him seem like a teacher. "Please pardon him for his impertinence, lady. Deputy General Chun has always been like this. If his words offended you, please allow me to apologize to you on behalf of him. But our General-in-Chief would like to have a talk with you. Would you mind walking a few steps?" His voice was mild and elegant. Though his words were polite, his attitude was neither humble nor haughty. Because of this, Yunwu couldn't help sizing him up. Just now, when he was walking over, his steps was sure-footed, and his chi was stable, which indicated that he was probably a kung fu expert, but he managed to conceal his warrior's chi with his cultured and elegant appearance. Even Yunwu could barely detect it. By no means was he a common person. Judging from his clothing, words, and manners, he probably was a military counselor, and his status was probably pretty high. Now that Lord Counselor put it this way, I'm actually interested in meeting this General-in-Chief Yun you mentioned. Yunwu withdrew her gaze, curved her lips, and said, on hearing her calling him Lord Counselor, when you couldn't help lifting his eyebrows. He watched Yunwu, and a flash of amusement crossed the bottom of his eyes. How piercing this girl's eyes were. She actually guessed his identity after briefly peering at him. This way, please, lady. Seeing that when you led the way himself, all those soldiers nearby were amazed. Counselor Wan was invited back by General-in-Chief himself. Even General-in-Chief was respectful to him. But now he was leading the way for this black-faced little girl? Chunling's face was a little sudden. Watching Yunwu, who was leisurely, languid, and didn't have the right attitude that she should have when she was about to meet the General-in-Chief, he felt a little uncomfortable. But he didn't say anything, following them with a sullen face. After a while, they walked through ranks of soldiers and finally arrived at a broad open space at the rear. Corpses in this area had been sketchily cleared off. After bringing Yunwu to this place, when you took a step forward and said very respectfully to a heavily armed, tall figure who was standing among some officers, General, she's here. That tall figure, who was standing with his back to Yunwu, turned around after hearing his words. This man was nobody else but Yunlingyi, the General-in-Chief Yun of Zhou Kingdom. Originally, Yunlingyi was in a border city in the south. When magic beasts brought chaos to this border city in the west, in order to ensure the safety of the 7th prince who was garrisoning this border city, the emperor issued an order and dispatched him to the west to deal with magic beasts. Yunwu had been in this exotic world for more than half a year, but this was the first time that she had seen her natural father. He was wearing military uniform covered by silver armor, barely in his 40s. His face was a mixture of seriousness and apathy. In his piercing eyes gleamed strictness and solemnity specific to servicemen. After flicking a glance at Yunwu, whose face was black, he briefly frowned. But the look on his face was still serious and apathetic. In a cold, deep voice, he asked, "You were the one who stole the phoenix egg? Are you aware of the crime you committed?" She was supposed to have some special feelings since this was the first time that she had met her natural father, but Yunwu didn't feel anything. Instead, she took an instant dislike to him on hearing the first remark he made. "What do you mean, General-in-Chief Yun?" Yunwu cast a cold, languid glance in his direction, saying, "Does General-in-Chief Yun by any chance also think that I was the one who deliberately stole the phoenix egg? That I'm the cause of this war? You were not. I never expected that General-in-Chief Yun, the supreme commander of Zhou Kingdom's armies, is also so stupid." The latter half of her remark was very sharp. She stared back at him, the look in her eyes just as apathetic. Faces of other generals changed as they heard this. Chunling's face abruptly fell as he heard her words. He thundered, "Little girl, do you have any idea who you're talking to? How dare you be so impertinent? I can mete out punishment to you according to military laws for what you have just said." Yunwu was not afraid at all. Instead, she curved her lips and turned her head aside, saying, "Deputy General Chun, those were quite big words. General-in-Chief didn't say anything yet, but you started yelling. Do you think that your status is higher than his? You. Bullshit." Chunling's face was dark with rage after he heard her words. What an eloquent girl. This girl really wouldn't let anybody get the best of her. When you had been silently observing her all along. Right at this moment when Chunling was so angry that he was about to pull out his saber, when you hurriedly walked forward and said mildly with a smile, "That's enough, Deputy General Chun. Stay out of this. Let General-in-Chief handle it. You're taking her side? I'm not taking anybody's side. But if you keep doing this, you'll only end up embarrassed. When you deliberately lowered his voice when he said the latter half of his remarks, though she was merely fabricating it when she said that Deputy General Chun wanted to arrogate himself the right to mete out punishment, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers watching this. If he really did something on an impulse, there would be no way back. After hearing this, Chun Ling was speechless with anger for quite a while. He darted a ferocious look at Yun Wu and took his leave silently with a twitch of his hand. Yun Wu slightly squinted her purple eyes, flicked a glance at Wen Yu, and then briefly sized him up. This counselor had been smiling all along. He seemed unthreatening but was absolutely far more sophisticated and smarter than that deputy general. He was a typical smiling tiger, outwardly kind but inwardly cruel. However, Yunwu had no interest in competing with him. Now that she had seen this so-called father, Yunwu didn't want to waste any time continuing to talk with them. You don't have to deal with this any longer. Now that you suspect I was the one who did that, just take it as the truth. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to take my leave. After saying this blandly, Yunwu turned around, planning to leave. However, Yun Lingyi's apathetic, commanding voice came from behind. Now that you admitted you did that, I can't let you leave. Guards, take her. On hearing the order, soldiers nearby flooded over and solidly surrounded Yunwu. Their wicked-looking swords reflected cold gleams. Yunwu's eyes swept around with iciness gleaming at the bottom of them. She turned her head back and looked in the direction of Yun Lingyi, whose face was sullen all along. What are you doing? You want to arrest me? You're the cause of this war and responsible for the deaths of so many people. No matter what the reason was, I have to escort you back to the capital. His Majesty will decide how to punish you, Yun Lingyi said apathetically and seriously, watching her with an expressionless face. May I ask what kind of punishment His Majesty will mete out to me? Beheading me? Or condemning all my family members and relatives to death? Yunwu lifted her eyebrows and asked. Yun Lingyi made no response. A general beside him said in a gruff voice, "So many people died because of you. Even the deaths of all your family members and relatives won't be enough to atone for your crime." On hearing this, Yunwu couldn't help bursting into laugh in which there was a tone of inexplicable sarcasm. What are you laughing about? Staring at her, Wen Yu frowned. Her laugh confused everybody present. Under the circumstances, she still dared to laugh like that? Did she lose her sanity because of overwhelming fear? Troops and officers around her thought. Yunwu stopped laughing and a flash of coldness crossed the bottom of her eyes. I'm actually anticipating the day when all my family members and relatives would be condemned to death. Watching her, Yun Lingyi kept having this feeling that the way she looked at him was somewhat strange. But he still yelled in a cold and serious tone, "Take her away." Soldiers immediately started closing in on Yunwu. Wait, General-in-Chief. About this matter, would you please allow me to express my opinion first? When you said, Yun Lingyi flicked a glance at him with a cold, sullen look on his face, saying nothing. However, before when you spoke again, Yunwu curved her lips in a smile and said blandly, Lord Counselor, there is no need for you to make any more remarks. General-in-Chief Yun is determined to uphold the dignity of the law. How could he show mercy on me whose family members and relatives should be condemned to death? Was she saying that she didn't want anybody to intercede for her? That she'd already resigned herself to her fate? Lady, General-in-Chief didn't mean that. But I was born hard to kill. Even if God wants to take my life, he has to ask for my permission first, not to mention your emperor. Her voice was bland, but there was wild arrogance in it. What a haughty girl! How dare she say such treasonable and heretical words? She's so conceited. Tell me about it. This girl should be put to the sword on the spot. On hearing her words, all those generals around couldn't help mumbling, their faces very serious. How dare this black-faced girl make such remarks? Isn't she too self-important? With a sullen and angry look on his face, Chun-Ling abruptly thundered, "What an arrogant girl! I'd like to find out whether it is because you are hard to kill or because you're incurably stubborn that you dare to be so haughty." He had been forbearing all along. If he didn't teach this arrogant girl a lesson, his anger would never dissolve. He mobilized Tier 7 late-stage fighting spirit and shot towards Yun-Woo like greased lightning. Yun-Woo curved her lips in a sneer, an icy look in her eyes. When the sword was swung at her, with a single movement of her feet and a sudden twitch of her figure, she instantly disappeared into thin air on the spot. The sword missed its target. Chun-Ling was stunned. Where was she? With a frown on his face, Chun-Ling turned his head back and looked around. But all of a sudden, a stabbing pain accompanied by cold was felt in his neck, and with that he smelled a faint smell of blood. I say this a lot. Whoever wants to kill me will die before me. Deputy General Chun, do you think I should take you life first? A cold voice came from beside his ear. All Chun-Ling's movements froze, surprise gleaming in his eyes. Horror and puzzlement rose inside him. She was so fast. He didn't know when she appeared at all. Standing beside him, Yun-Woo was holding a cold dagger against his neck. The skin of his neck was slit by the sharp blade, beads of blood oozing out of the shallow cut. In those troops' eyes, Yun-Woo's figure seemed to have appeared out of thin air, which was weird and astonishing. But when they collected themselves, those generals around started yelling, "You little girl are so bold. Let go of Deputy General Chun. How dare you be so unruly in front of the General-in-Chief? The crime you committed is beyond atonement. Let him go." While those generals were yelling, Yun-Lingyi's face also went cold and sullen. "Let go of him. Abducting a general will double your guilt. Release him immediately, or else I'll make you to." On hearing this, Yun-Woo secretly sneered. She raised her cold eyes and looked at Yun-Lingyi. "General-in-Chief, you convicted me of a crime doubly serious so easily? I might be scared to death. But I'd like to ask a question. This deputy general of yours was aiming to kill from the very beginning. Was I supposed to stand still and let him stab his sword into my heart? That's the military discipline you've been talking about?" In her last incarnation, she was an orphan who had no idea what it felt like to have a father. During this incarnation, she had a father. Though she had never expressed anything to him, deep down in her heart, she still had a trace of expectation. As a result, when that man mentioned General-in-Chief Yun, she agreed to come here to meet her so-called father. It was not until she was disillusioned that she found that coldness and anger was inexplicably bubbling in her. When he made those remarks with a cold face regardless of the facts, Yun-Woo felt even more disappointed. "You were the cause of this war, and you also made impertinent remarks. Deputy General Chin's trying to arrest you was entirely reasonable," Yun-Lingyi said coldly, watching her with an icy look. "Entirely reasonable? Ha ha." Yun-Woo laughed, as if having just heard the funniest joke. During the previous fight, Chun-Ling was aiming at her vital parts. If he hit the target, she would have been disabled, if not killed. All generals present were kung fu practitioners, so they were all aware of this. The frown on Wen Yu's face grew deeper as he watched Yun-Woo laughing, as if he was pondering over something and about to find out something. "General-in-Chief, would you please calm down and hear me out?" At this moment, Wen Yu spoke again. "Counselor 1, there's no need for you to intercede on her behalf. She threatened a general with a dagger in front of so many troops. If she gets away without being severely punished, how is General-in-Chief supposed to establish his authority and lead the army in the future?" "That's true. She did this in front of so many soldiers. How could we let this criminal get away unpunished? General-in-Chief, you don't have to do it yourself. Let me teach this girl a lesson." A general in middle stage of Tier 8 stepped forward. Yun-Woo just stood there and coldly watched them. When she saw Yun-Lingyi nodding, Yun-Woo curved her lips in an extremely cold smile, as if she had finally given up her fond hope. "Yun-Lingyi, the General-in-Chief, you really broadened my horizons today." The moment she finished the last word, her dagger, which had been against Chen Ling's neck, was swished towards the ground before Yunlungi like a beam of cold light. Meanwhile, before anybody could react, she concentrated her strength in her palm and threw a palm attack on the back of Chen Ling's right shoulder. Crack! With a faint sound of bones snapping, Chen Ling was sent flying away like a piece of rag. Yunling's face instantly changed. He mobilized his Tier 9 late-stage fighting spirit, moved sideways and caught Chen Ling, who was thrown away. Meanwhile, he threw a palm strike at Yunwu. But Yunwu's figure weirdly flashed away and dodged Yunling's strike. Yunlungi, from now on, the relation between you and me will be like that dagger. The chilly voice was still resounding around the battlefield where hundreds of thousands of troops were standing. But Yunwu had leaped upwards, turned into a whirlwind and shot into the sky like a beam of black light. What kind of speed could be deemed fast? People who saw this scene knew the answer. Amazed, thousands of troops raised their heads and saw that the black light flashed across the sky and soon disappeared into the distance. At this moment, Chen Ling's pain groan was heard. Ouch! My hand! It was at this moment that those soldiers and officers collected themselves. Get the medic here. After the order was issued, a medic hurriedly came. However, an amazed and solemn look appeared on the medic's face after he performed a medical examination. His bones broke under that palm strike. I'm afraid Deputy General Chun won't be able to use this arm again. Chen Ling, who was sweating buckets due to the sharp pain, paled visibly on hearing the medic's words and almost sat up from the ground. What? What did you say? I'm disabled? As if panic-stricken, Chen Ling said emotionally, No. I want to fight side by side with the General-in-Chief. I can't lose my arm. Medic, help me, please. Deputy General Chun, I'm really sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Alas. On hearing Chen Ling's begging, the medic sighed and shook his head. Medic, is the wound in Deputy General Chin's arm really incurable? Yunlungi furrowed his forehead. He had never expected that girl was so ruthless. The medic stood up, walked forward and shook his head. General-in-Chief, in some cases, broken bones can be cured. But all the bones of his arm fractured. Even if he is cured, I'm afraid he would never be able to use a sword again. Hearing this, Chen Ling instantly felt as if he was thrown into hell. Despair glinting in his eyes, he clamped his left hand on his right arm, which was aching intensely, and which he could control no more. As a serviceman, without his arm, how was he supposed to fight? How was he supposed to serve his country? Wasn't he now good for nothing? Anger surged through all generals present as they heard the medic's words. That black-faced girl disabled Deputy General Chan. She's so vicious. God damn it. We should have stabbed her to death just now. What a ruthless girl. Yunling's face was also sullen. He had seen his deputy general disabled before his very eyes, but there was nothing he could do. He clenched his fists tightly. General, look at that dagger. When you suddenly said in a deep, surprised voice, looking in the direction that he was pointing in, those generals found that the dagger was still sticking upright in the ground. What was the fuss about? It's just a dagger. However, before the general's voice died away, crack! A faint snap was heard, and with that the dagger, along with its hilt, broke into numerous pieces which then scattered onto the ground. All pieces were very even. One needed precise control of one's spiritual power to do this. Which one of these generals present was capable of making a dagger break into even pieces like that? Even Yunlingyi probably couldn't do that. At this moment, a breeze blew by. Beneath the gaze of all people present, those pieces of the dagger turned into wind element and instantly disappeared into the air. Everybody's pupils abruptly contracted, astonishment gleaming in them. That was not a real dagger. It was a wind blade formed of wind element. How was that possible? She actually condensed wind element into a tangible weapon. Who was that black-faced girl exactly? A look of terror flashed across those generals' faces. Yunlungi frowned, as if he also hadn't expected that dagger was formed of wind element. Surprised as Yu was, he was more puzzled. General-in-Chief, judging from that girl's words, there seems to be some kind of relation between you two. You really have no impression of her? She was related to him? Yunlungi ransacked his memory but didn't find anything concerning that girl. However, the last remark she made before she left was still reverberating in his mind. The relation between you and me will be like that dagger. In the depths of the maple ridge, Yunwu was unaware of what kind of trouble the two ambrosian fruits she gave to the little guy had caused the phoenix. When the old man and the middle-aged man appeared in midair above the nest of the phoenix, the furious and aggressive chi given off by them sent all magic beasts nearby lie prostrate on the ground, trembling in fear. Inside the cavern, the little, chubby reek was misbehaving itself. It kept climbing out of its place, and the phoenix had to bring it back again and again. It also kept calling Mom, and it was very obvious that it was not calling the phoenix, which was why there was a sullen look on her face. She had a faint feeling that there was some kind of bond between her son and that black-faced girl, and somehow she found that bond very familiar. As if, while the phoenix was contemplating in suspicion, a potent chi suddenly surged into the cavern with fierce momentum. Who is it? The phoenix's face darkened. She casually threw little Reek onto the body of the spotted snake on the side, and then instantly flashed out of the cavern. The moment she went out of the cavern, the phoenix sensed a chi filled with fury and frowned. Who are you? Why did you come to my phoenix cavern? On the sight of the phoenix, the old man and the middle-aged man standing in midair smelled a gratifying and refreshing fruit fragrance given off by her, anger bubbling inside them. Was it you, a phoenix descended into our realm, who committed theft in our orchard? The middle-aged man's voice was very deep and angry. Orchard? Which orchard? I don't know what you are talking about. Humans are not welcome in this area. Leave immediately or else I'll be hard on you. After what had happened to her son, the phoenix was exceptionally antipathetic to humans. However, on hearing her words, the middle-aged man in midair, who recalled that their precious fruits had been stolen twice, instantly became furious. Humph, be hard on us? I'd like to find out who is going to be hard on who. The moment he finished the last word, with a whooshing sound, the middle-aged man flashed down like greased lightning. In the blink of an eye, a red figure and a gray figure engaged each other, and an intense fight abruptly started outside the cavern, potent killing aura spreading outwards. All magic beasts nearby were scared and hurriedly fled away from this area. The two figures violently impacted on each other, generating a massive undulation of power that almost quaked the whole mountain. Inside the cavern, little Reek, which was carefully wrapped in the spotted snake's body, opened its mouth, revealing two sharp fangs, and bit the spotted snake. Hiss, hiss. The spotted snake struggled in sharp pain. Taking advantage of this opportunity, little Reek slid down the spotted snake's body and ran towards the outside of the cavern. Hiss, hiss. On seeing this, the spotted snake was horrified and hastily pursued the little guy, heedless of the two small bloody holes in its body. However, little Reek had just reached the entrance of the cave when its chubby little body was immobilized by a force shot down from midair. The old man standing in midair twitched his sleeve, and with that little Reek swished towards him like a ball and landed in his palm. A hybrid? I've lived most of my life, yet this is the first time that I've seen this kind of weird little thing. The old man lifted his eyebrows and mumbled after flicking a glance at the half-human little guy in his hand. Little Reek was imprisoned in a transparent ball formed of energy. It kept scratching on the inside of the energy ball with its sharp claws, making scratchy sounds. Unfortunately, all its efforts were in vain. Eventually, it stopped, tilted its little head, and watched the white-bearded old man. When the old man was sizing it up, it was also affectedly peering at him. As the old man murmured, it also imitatively lifted its little eyebrows and murmured, "Old man. Ugly. Bad-looking. Bad-looking." On hearing this, the old man was stunned, as if he had never expected that this little guy not only could imitate him, but also was very good at this. However, when he smelled the scent of ambrosian fruits given off by it, he furrowed his forehead. It seemed that this phoenix was indeed the one who had stolen those fruits in the orchard. His thousands of years' work had been stolen. How could he not be angry? How could he be indifferent? But surprisingly, apart from the scent of ambrosian fruits, he also sensed a trace of a summoner's chi in this little guy. It had been indentured to a summoner? The old man couldn't help sizing it up. When he finally confirmed this, a flash of surprise crossed the bottom of his eyes. A summoner had really been born on this Shinjo continent? "Give me my child back!" The phoenix thundered in anger. The red figure that had been fighting with the middle-aged man furiously launched an attack on the old man, trying to snatch her son from the old man's hand. A cold look flashed across the bottom of the old man's eyes, which had witnessed vicissitudes of his life. With a twitch of his hand, a surge of potent power hurtled at the phoenix and threw her away. Ah! The phoenix was hit by that weird, potent power and thrown back, almost totally powerless to fight back. When a magic beast transformed itself into a human, its fighting capability would become slightly weaker, but she shouldn't have been too weak to fight back. There was only one plausible explanation for this. The opponent was too powerful. Who was this old man exactly? Who are you exactly? Why did you take my son away from me? The phoenix glared at the old man standing in midair, her eyes wide with rage. "If you want your son back, bring me that summoner whom your son is indentured to." This was the only remark that the old man made. After saying this, he slowly turned around and left. He had just turned around, but in the blink of an eye, his figure was hundreds of miles away, and the next second, his figure disappeared into the distance. She wanted to pursue him but found that he was nowhere to be seen. On seeing this, with a twitch of his figure, the middle-aged man also instantly disappeared into thin air on the spot. Watching this, the phoenix was both angry and concerned. But what angered her even more was that her son had been indentured to a human. She recalled that black-faced girl. Ah, human. "When I catch you, I'll tear you to pieces." A furious, piercing cry instantly rippled through the whole forest. Flocks of birds were alarmed and scattered in all directions. Yunwu had no idea what had just happened in the depths of the Maple Ridge, and she certainly didn't know that her undesigned actions were going to generate a series of troublesome consequences. The moment Yunwu left the battlefield, she landed in a lonely spot outside a border city, because she had faintly felt that two figures seemed to have been pursuing her. It seemed that the two assassins had really been lying in ambush outside the forest, waiting for her to show up. It was just that for some reason, they didn't launch an attack on her but just followed her. As Yunwu landed on the ground, she put on a black robe, enveloped herself in wind element, and with a twitch of her figure, she instantly disappeared into thin air on the spot. Yunwu felt that the 7 elemental powers in her body had considerably strengthened after she had that long sleep in that bottomless pit and then drank blood of that tiger condor. And her speed had also become more than twice as fast as before. Though she still wasn't powerful enough to kill those two assassins, since she was merely an early stage of Tier 7, fleeing from them was an easy job to her. After entering the border city, that black figure directly went into the busiest downtown area. Unexpectedly, because of her black face, she was always the center of everybody's attention wherever she went. Resigned, Yunwu quickly walked into an inn. Beneath the eccentric gaze of the innkeeper and guests, she ordered a room and had a bellman bring her some hot water. Back then in that pit, all her hair had been soaked in that little brat's saliva and become very sticky. Though it was dry now, she still felt very uncomfortable. Now that she was in an inn, she decided to do some washing first. When Yunwu looked into the bronze mirror and saw that face as black as that of an African native, she was nearly scared to death. How did she end up like this? That kind of black gave people this feeling that it was her real skin color. Even her lips were also black. Yunwoo hurriedly rubbed her face, only to find that the color didn't change a little bit. She was horrified, her heart pounding. Soon, the bellman sent a basin of hot water to her room. Yunwoo dipped her hands into hot water, rubbed her face again, and was relieved. Fortunately, the black dirt could be dissolved by hot water. Otherwise, her life would have been frightened out of her. She couldn't imagine life with a face as black as that. After having the bellman change the hot water 5 times, Yunwoo finally managed to wash her face and hair clean. Her skin regained its former delicacy and whiteness, her black hair glossy. Added to them her otherworldly purple eyes, she looked amazingly charming, making people's hearts palpitate, which could be proved by the bellman who was standing at the doorway, transfixed with shock. Her eyes were so wide that it seemed as if the 2 eyeballs were about to drop out of the sockets, and his mouth almost watered, too. "Bellman, if you've had your fill, please close the door for me." It was not until Yunwoo spoke that the bellman collected himself. A look of awkwardness flashed across the bellman's face. As if embarrassed, he scratched his head and said, "My apologies. I'm just here to ask you whether you need more hot water. I've just prepared more in the kitchen. If you need it, I'll bring you some right away." "That won't be necessary." After saying this, Yunwoo tossed a silver ingot to him. "This is your tip. You may leave." "Thank you, lady. If you need anything, just call me." The bellman's eyes lit up as he saw the silver ingot in his hands, and with that he hurriedly walked out of the room. When it came to managing money, Yunwoo actually didn't know much about it. But the bellman had brought her hot water 5 times in a row, which counted as trading manual labor for money, so there was no need for her to be niggardly. After cleaning herself up, Yunwoo intended to leave, but soon she realized that if she went outside like this, it probably wouldn't be long before the enemies found her. So she disguised herself as a man and then left the inn in a leisurely and composed manner. As expected, outside of the inn, she detected Tu Chi hiding in the dark. But at this moment, dressed in shiny clothes with a lot of golden decorations, he was emaciated with sallow complexion, sickly looking, and was also eyeing girls up like a lascivious playboy. She attracted a lot of pedestrians' attention as she walked out of the inn. The 2 people hiding in the dark flicked a glance at him and contemptuously moved their eyes aside. Unnoticeably, Yunwoo slightly curved her lips. In an aimless and idle manner, humming a casual tune, she managed to leave the area in front of the 2 assassins' very eyes. However, what Yunwoo didn't know was that not long after she left, this inn was solidly surrounded by a group of soldiers, which scared a lot of passers-by. What was going on? Why did so many soldiers go to downtown area? What happened? Did a purple-eyed female come to this inn not long ago? A ferocious-looking officer yelled in a gruff voice the moment he walked into the inn, followed by a couple of soldiers. His voice was as loud as thunder. Scared, all guests in the inn hurriedly ran out. "OFFI. Officer, what is going on? We're all law-abiding citizens, not Dash." The innkeeper hastily walked up to the officer. "I'm asking you whether you saw someone with purple eyes. Why are you taking nonsense? Just answer me with yes or no." The officer was very impatient. While the innkeeper was thinking, another batch of soldiers flooded into the inn. On the sight of those soldiers in the inn, the one in charge also yelled in a gruff voice, "Innkeeper, did a black-faced female check in at your inn? Where is she?" "Black-faced?" On hearing this word, the innkeeper instantly remembered. Yes. There is indeed a woman whose whole face is black, and her eyes are purple. Where is she?" 2 gruff yells were heard at the same time. The innkeeper buckled at the knees and hurriedly asked the bellman to lead these soldiers upstairs to find the person they wanted. However, the female wasn't in the room. Naturally, those soldiers who came later were sent here by Yunlungi. They hurried all the way here to arrest Yunwoo. And those who came first were at the command of the 7th prince, who was staying in his mansion for rehabilitation. At this moment, When news came that the female was gone and that Yun Lingyi was also trying to arrest her, a sullen, cold look appeared on the face of Zhou Feiyu, who was sitting in the host seat in a living room. What a bunch of fatheads! Accompanied by an angry roar, a teacup was heavily thrown to the ground and busted. Watching Zhou Feiyu, who inexplicably became irascible, Coldness Wu, who was standing at the side, furrowed his forehead. A general kneeling on one knee on the ground hurriedly said, "Your Highness, it probably hasn't been long since she left. I've already had some men to close all city gates. A city-wide search is ongoing. As long as she's still in the city, we'll surely find her." Upon seeing that the look in Zhou Feiyu's eyes was still chilly, Coldness Wu also said, "Your Highness, if that person was really Miss Wu, maybe it's better that she has left. Otherwise, if General-in-Chief Yun's soldiers catch her, things might be even trickier." Zhou Feiyu's anger seemed to be relieved somewhat after he heard these words. "What do you think we should do?" Zhou Feiyu raised his eyes and looked at him. "Now that General-in-Chief Yun has already known about it, there's no need for us to try to act covertly. We can just keep searching." "I think General-in-Chief Yun won't be bold enough to interfere in your Highness matters." After contemplating for a while, Zhou Feiyu said to the general in the hall, "Go and make some inquiries. Find out what it is that Yun Lingyi wants." "Yes." The general quickly took his leave. There were only 2 people left in the living room. "Your Highness, I seldom see you get so emotional. Is it because of the Queen's interference in national affairs?" Coldness Wu asked Zhou Feiyu in a deep, low voice. Zhou Feiyu knitted his eyebrows tightly together, an icy look in his eyes. "Don't you think you're being a busybody? I was being unduly talkative. But, Your Highness, given the current situation, if you really want to make some preparations, maybe we can have an audience with the Dragon Cabinet and talk about cooperation. Young Master Long and the Crown Prince are like Damon and Pythias. Do you really think he and I have anything to talk about?" "Your Highness, the so-called Damon and Pythias thing is merely the Crown Prince's exaggerative bluff. Actually, that young Master Long has a renowned merchant who is willing to dabble in anything profitable. As long as our offer is favorable enough, cooperation is not impossible." Zhou Feiyu raised his eyes and looked at Coldness Wu. "You can find that young Master Long?" The leader of the Dragon Cabinet, young Master Long, was a very mysterious man whose whereabouts had always been a secret. Very few people had ever seen him. In fact, a few years ago, Zhou Feiyu sent some men to look for him for several times but never found clues. But a man as mysterious as him actually made people feel that he was very dangerous. Coldness Wu gave a mild smile. "A couple of years ago, my family once did business with the Dragon Cabinet. Maybe I can make contact with the Dragon Cabinet via my family. But rumor says that for some reason, the Dragon Cabinet has suddenly deployed their men in the Luo city recently. It seems as if those movements were directed against the Murong family." "The Murong family?" Zhou Feiyu lifted his eyebrows. "Yes." A deep look flashed across the bottom of Zhou Feiyu's eyes. "After this talk is over, pay a visit to the Murong family. Venerable Mistress Murong cured the pestilence in the Luo city and the Water city. Send a thank you gift to her on my behalf." Coldness Wu nodded with a smile. "Yes." At the west gate of the border city, a luxurious horse-drawn carriage, driven by a horsekeeper, was slowly driving towards the outside of the city. However, before it could go out of the city, some soldiers stopped it. "The city gate is sealed. No entrance or exit allowed." A loud, gruff voice was heard. The horsekeeper hurriedly stopped the carriage and said in a respectful tone, "Officer, we're from another city. My master is seriously ill and has to return home to receive medical treatment. I wonder if officer would be so kind as to do us a favor dash. I don't care who you are. Get off, get off. Security check." However, before that horsekeeper could finish his sentence, that soldier impatiently dragged him off the carriage and heavily pushed the door of the carriage open. In the carriage, a gloriously clothed noble master was leisurely sprawling in a couch, emaciated with sallow complexion, as if incurably ill. After flicking a glimpse at the eyes of the noble master, that soldier dismissively withdrew his eyes. Then the officer in charge said loudly to those nearby residents who were stranded, "We're looking for a purple-eyed female. Anyone who offers clues will be handsomely rewarded by His Highness." My lord, who is that female? Why did His Highness seal all city gates to catch her? Did that female by any chance try to hurt His Highness? A feeble, effeminate male voice came from inside the carriage. On hearing this, all those people who wanted to get out of the city but were stopped started querying. Yeah, what exactly did that female do? Why are you sealing city gates? We have goods to deliver. If you seal up the city, how can we do business? That's true. I have to go back home. If you don't let me through, what am I supposed to do? Hearing those animated discussion, those soldiers became very impatient. Why are you asking so many questions? Just inform us if you see anyone with purple eyes. Now clear off. Don't gather here. Then when can we leave the city, officer? You can leave when you are allowed to leave. Now, get out of my sight. After hearing that rude, impatient voice, residents didn't dare to stay. Before long, they cleared off, though discontented and resigned. The horsekeeper respectfully looked at the noble master and said, "Master, the city gate is sealed. We go back." Yes. The horsekeeper closed the door and turned the carriage around. Naturally, the noble master, languidly sprawling in the couch inside the carriage, was Yunwu. With her disguise, hardly anybody could recognize her. Originally, she had planned to hire a horse-drawn carriage and get out of the city above board. But unexpectedly, the city had been sealed up. The seventh prince? How did that Zhou Feiyu know she was in this border city? And he also sealed off the city to search for her, which got a lot of people involved. Now that leaving this city in an above-board manner was no longer an option, she had no choice but to leave at night. If she tried to get out during daytime, other trouble might come to her apart from the two assassins. She had the horsekeeper take her to the busiest street and find a large inn. She had just checked in and hadn't gone upstairs yet when a group of soldiers flooded into the inn. "Innkeeper, did you see a black-faced female with purple eyes come here?" The soldier leading the team yelled in a gruff voice. Almost all people in the inn could hear him. The innkeeper, who seemed to be a sophisticated man, hurriedly walked up to him with a big smile. "Sir, I've been standing behind the counter all day, but I didn't see anybody with a black face. If you don't believe me, I can have the bellman lead you upstairs to search the rooms. But would you please be so kind as to do it quietly so that my guests won't be scared?" Upon these words, the innkeeper stealthily stuffed a big silver ingot into the soldier's hand. The ferocious look on the soldier's face was replaced by a smile. He secretly put the silver ingot into his pocket and said, "Now that you told me there was no such person here, I'll go and search another place. But if you see that black-faced woman, report immediately." "Yes, yes. I'll follow your order and keep an eye open. Once I see anyone with a black face, I'll report to you right away, sir." With a big smile on his face, the innkeeper bowed respectfully and saw those soldiers off. After they left, the innkeeper seemed to be relieved. Yunwu, who had been standing beside the counter all along, watched the innkeeper who had just turned around and asked him in a seemingly very curious tone, "Innkeeper, were those soldiers looking for some black-faced woman? Who is that woman exactly? She caused such a sensation." "Master, this matter really makes me feel very resigned. They were the fourth batch of soldiers who came here to search today. Some of them said that they were hunting a black-faced female who wounded a deputy general. Others said that the seventh prince was looking for a purple-eyed female. God knows who that black-faced, purple-eyed woman is. Commoners like me have no choice but to let them search our places again and again. I just take it as buying peace with money." After saying this, the innkeeper let out another seemingly resigned sigh and returned to the counter. A female who wounded a deputy general? So, apart from that Zhou Feiyu, Yunlingyi's men were also hunting for her? Unexpectedly, he had taken action so soon. It had been only a short while since she entered the city, but the hunt had already started. The look in Yunwu's eyes was somewhat deep and cold, but she affected an air of unconcern and walked out of the inn. Disguised as a lascivious, sickly master from some rich family, she walked into the busy street with an exaggerated swagger. After making an inquiry from a passerby about Yunlingyi's temporary abode in the city, Yunwu headed for that place in an above-board manner. In the northern suburb of the city, that place had originally been a spacious farmhouse, surrounded by flatlands. Since Yunlingyi was dispatched here over half a month ago, this northern suburb had become his encampment. Most troops were stationed in further areas outside the city, so there were not many soldiers guarding the encampment. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.